Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of the Kane Audio VLOG. It is Friday, so it's time for another Ask Me Anything, where usual rules apply. You can ask me anything and I'll get back to you next week by reading out the comments and answering the questions. Before I get started on last week's questions, house admin, it's been so busy that I don't even know what I've done. I don't think there's anything to update on. Nope. So I'm gonna crack straight on. Yeah, can't think of anything. So let's just get on with it. So sit down, grab a cup of coffee, and enjoy. Starting with unknown artist. Hi Dom, Denon, high five. Bloody long one last week, but found it very interesting. Saves me watching the wife soaps, so thank you. Good call. A general topic this time around, which I know you've probably touched on before but can't remember. I find there's so many subgenres to every genre. I can tell slight differences in the subgenres, but not enough, in my opinion, to have its own statement. What do you think? Do you know what? I completely ignore genres and subgenres. And I think I kind of always have. The only time it's ever been a thing is when it comes to DJing and I'm on Beatport looking for music. And even then, I will listen to latest releases in tech house, melodic house and techno, and I'm sure there's one or two others that I probably go through as well. Because progressive house is the other one. I think my style of music in terms of production and DJing has always sort of not really adhered to one specific genre, let alone subgenre. But again, maybe that comes down to me being old school, and you know, in the 90s, for example, you listened to dance music. It was just, you know, you were into whether it was house or hardcore or whatever it was, you know, the rave scene and whatever that was going on. It was just dance music. I don't know if everyone was like this, but for me, you know, I would play, I'd listen to a mixtape from anyone from, you know, John 00 Fleming, which is kind of trance or was kind of trance, to Oscar P, which was, you know, Chicago house. It was just anything and everything really. So I never really paid too much attention, and I guess like even now, you know, sometimes a record label will sort of ask me what should they categorize my track in, what genre, because obviously if you're submitting it to Beatport you need to pick a genre for it to go into, and I always sort of let them decide that, because I just don't care enough basically. I look at electronic music as being exactly what it is. If I like the sound of it, then I'll buy it, study it, and come up with something along those lines. But finding a lot of tracks I like fall into a number of different genres. To me, they're all very similar. How do they decide on what category to put tracks in? Some of them are just wrong. Yeah, so that's actually pretty much what I just said. Yeah, some of them are blatantly wrong. A lot of that comes down to I think it's more down to the politics of music and music releases, and I know some artists, for example, blatantly make what I would probably call tech house, but they don't want to be labelled as tech house, so they'll register their track as techno, even though it really doesn't belong in that. So I think a lot of it comes down to that. A lot of it also, certainly years ago, I don't know so much anymore, Obviously, being with Mau5trap, I don't tend to get involved with beatport submission side of stuff. But I know when I was running a label and whatever, sometimes you'd put something as say electro house, and then when it came out it would be under techno or whatever. I'm guessing they made an executive decision on that, or maybe it was just a clerical error, I don't know. But yeah, I always sort of struggle with even on like my tracks and a lot of the tracks on Mau5trap, when you look at them on YouTube and read some of the comments, which of course I do because it's my music, I'll see some people sort of trying to define, oh, what genre is this? And I always find that interesting, because I always think, well, does it matter? Does it? You either like it or you don't. And I don't, I've always been very careful with categorizing stuff, because, for example, I say I don't like R&B, as in modern R&B, not rhythm and blues, because I don't like vocodery vocals, and I don't like the lyrics in most of the tracks that I hear in that genre, and I'm not a huge fan of that BPM, and I just generally I just feel like it's kind of lowest common denominator music, especially in the pop side of it. But I don't think I would ever distinctly say I do not like R&B. I will always sort of clarify by saying I don't like most R&B, because I haven't heard it all, and for all I know there could be some amazing tracks in that field, but I'm just not really bothered to give it a go. So yeah, I think general advice: ignore genres, don't worry about it. If you look at famous people like deadmau5, for example. What genre is he? I don't know, just it's dance music, because it kind of tippers on trance, tippers on progressive, tippers on techno. It's got a bit of everything in there, and it's just good music. So there we go. Sunset 86. Ooh, Denon. High five. Great AMA as always. Dom, haven't commented for a while. Been busy working, but I always tune in after work on a Friday night. Cool. I don't really have that many questions, but as you mentioned about using fewer tracks and better sound design, etc., I try to make compositions without layering too much, although sometimes they feel a bit weak or thin. Does adding reverb or delay help create a sense of filling out the space more? Yes and no. I think stuff like reverb and delay, you kind of always need to be quite subtle. If something... Well, maybe you don't even have to do that. I don't know. It's a tricky one, because it's one of those things that you need to only try and see if you prefer it, and then also double check on headphones, because sometimes reverb comes across as way louder on headphones than it does on normal speakers. And also it depends on where you want a sound to feature in the mix. So if, for example, like I'll use an arpeggiator in the background, if I'm looking for it to be a part of the rhythm of the track, then I need that sound. Let's say we're going for a saw wave with a really zero sustain and a really short decay, so it's a plucky sort of sound. Then I probably wouldn't use reverb on that, because I want it to be a feature of the percussion. The rhythm of that arpeggiator is, I need it to poke through the track. Whereas if, for example, I had an arpeggiator and it was a softer sound with, say, a slightly longer attack to it, and I wanted it to blend in as almost a pad effect, then I'd probably send it to a send channel, so I've still got those features, the attack transient features of that sound. Send it to a send channel with 100% wet reverb, and maybe really extend the reverb, but just lower the gain a bit, and maybe sidechain that send channel as well. And then that way the sound becomes extended and more pad like, and you can then wrap that around the kick drum using sidechain compression or something. So I guess it ultimately comes down to where you want that sound to feature in your mix, and do you want it to be poking through at the top, really sort of a prominent feature of your mix, or do you want it to be more subtle and drenched in reverb or delays, or both? And I think that's kind of a subjective choice. It really comes down to how many other layers you have going on, I suppose. So, you know, if you've got 20 layers of synths going on and they're all playing counter melodies and whatever else, then you probably don't want to drench those in reverb, because you don't want the extended sounds of those to sort of overlap too much. Similarly, if you're playing chords that are close and short intervals between the notes in a chord change, in a chord progression, if they're small intervals, you don't really want the delay or reverb to match. You know, if you're going from, say, C major to D major, then there's only a one note interval difference in that, or a one tone difference. So if you've still got the tail end of reverb of your C major moving into a D major, it might leave it a bit awkward. So yeah, kind of difficult to get in on that one. Sorry if it's a bit vague. I'm not too strong with reverb and delay, although I do understand the concepts. I struggle with those aspects. Otherwise, I do have a read more track that I'm working on that's not left me alone, in that, I mean, I keep coming back to it, whereas some ideas die or are forgotten. Yeah, if you find yourself coming back to a track over and over again, I would always say, go back to it, say whatever you think is an acceptable amount, say 5, 6, 7 times, whatever it is. If you find after a couple of weeks you've still not really made any real progress, just give it a rest for, say, a month or 2 months, because you might find you'll develop a new technique in something, and then it's always good to come back to that and go, do you know what, that new technique I've now learned, this melody or this technique or this rhythm or whatever it is, will now work in this new project, and you end up getting to sort of merge things together, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. So yeah, where was I? I know I need to move quickly, as I feel the track is the best thing I've conceived since I began making music on and off for the past 8 years, more as a hobbyist, but it's like a very personal track for me. Yeah, in which case definitely what I just said. So, you know, you might want to give it a month's break if it's a personal track to you as well. I've got several tracks that I've done. In fact, I've got one that really comes to mind that I wrote about 2 years ago. I even recorded my own vocal on there just as a sort of a filler thing. I can't sing for shit, so that's, you know, it's just a temp track basically of a vocal idea I had. It doesn't quite work on the track, but the sound design and the chord structure and everything in that track I really love. It just, there's something missing from it though, and I still haven't quite worked out. This is 2 years later. I still haven't quite worked out what that track is missing, but it's definitely missing something. So I'm just holding on to that, because it kind of, because it's a personal track and it means a lot to me, and there was a lot of emotion invested in that track. I kind of feel like that's worth hanging on to, because I'll eventually I'll come back to that track and something will happen. You know, maybe it'll be an album track or something, because I don't think it's a, you know, it's not a lead single, it's not necessarily an EP track unless it's like a B-side. It's not, you know, it's not a hit record or anything like that. It just means a lot to me. So it's something that I will probably keep for years to come, and I'll just keep trying something, and every now and then, you know, maybe every couple of months, maybe 6 months, I'll open it up and have a listen and go, oh, do you know what, actually I learned something last week and maybe that'll work in this. And you know, it's a long process. When I do eventually complete it, I would like to contact you to mix it down, as I know the value of using an engineer's ears will be far better than me trying to mix it. Yeah, I mean, you know, obviously I'm going to be biased here as a mix engineer, but I do often recommend to people, you know, get a mix engineer. If you want to use me, brilliant. I'm all for that. I love doing mixdowns. I get a huge pleasure in working on mixdowns, especially other people's mixdowns, and not so much my own. I don't enjoy my own so much. And one of the reasons for that is because with my own mixdowns, I kind of know what I'm doing. I kind of know what I always do right and what I always do wrong. And you know your own work inside out, so there could be obvious things that you just never really thought of because it just didn't occur to you at the time. So I often recommend people, you know, and if you're not in a position to afford a professional mix engineer, if you've got a friend who is also a producer, maybe just swap tracks. Just ring them up and go, hey, do you want to swap a track? And let's just test each other on a mixdown. I'll see what you do, you see what I do. You know, it's always worth trying that, because the more eyes you can have on a project, overseeing it, the more room there is for growth, I think, generally. So yeah, so that's something I definitely recommend, and like I say, all the better if you choose me. The only other advice, if you could give any, is I'm stuck on a bridge section. What advice could you give, as I seem to struggle a bit coming up with something new as a bridge? Bridges are kind of a tricky one. They're certainly not my specialty. So for anyone listening that doesn't know what a bridge is, it's kind of a middle section that leads from one thing to another. So in EDM, you'd expect that to be maybe a bit of a, maybe say 8 bars where there's no bass line, and maybe the bass drum gets filtered out a bit or something, and then comes back into the chorus or into a new verse or something like that. So it's kind of difficult to advise on that without knowing what genre, what vibe, whatever it is, you know, what you're aiming for. But I think as a bit of general advice, something I will always say when it comes to things like bridges, silence can be your friend. And I think music producers and musicians, quite often we forget about silence and the importance of having some space in your music. You know, you could have a huge bass line, huge drums, huge synths, everything's epic, you know, a great big vocal on a big chorus, and that can be great, but as a listener you kind of just need to, at some point throughout the track, you just need to dial it down a bit before then coming back into it, which is why, you know, we all use breakdowns and drops in our music. It's because as a listener you just need that moment of reality check and then back again. So bridges are exactly for that. So I'm probably coming across a bit vague here, but there's nothing wrong with a bit of silence. You could easily have something like maybe have some sort of sweeping effect and filter out the drums to the point of almost disappearing, but just then hold them there, so it sort of it holds that that tension for 8 bars or so, while maybe bringing in some new percussion on top just for that 8 bars. So it needs to be somewhat subtle. It needs to be maybe just a flick of the hi-hats and just something to sort of spice up the rhythm, maybe almost a change of rhythm. So it's almost, you know, maybe go for something like a half tempo rhythm on some hi-hats and claps or percussion or something like that, just for that sort of 8 bars, where maybe then you know, you can then continue one instrument just to keep that transition. You'd maybe keep either your bass line or your vocal or your lead synth, or, you know, something, so that it's just that sort of 4, 8, 16, probably 8 bars, that is sort of suggesting to the listener that something's about to change, but I'm not going to tell you what, basically. And yeah, and sometimes silence can be your friend there. So, you know, let's say it's an 8 bar bridge, and maybe go for 7 bars of that, and then just have a bar of nothing, you know, or even 3/4 of a bar, and then on beat 4 of your 8th bar, just bring in one snare, thunk, just or a cowbell donk, or something that then breaks all the mold. It's breaking the whole, you know, because everything has been so musical up to that point. You're building to something. Just have a bar of nothing, and then back in, and it's that break that becomes a hook in a track then. So yeah, I guess that's an idea anyway. Thanks, Dom. Great as always, and look forward to more of this stuff. You're welcome. Janice Luck-Mellis, Denon, high five. Cavacay, 5:22. Okay, that was impressive. Sound design in your head. What did I do at 5 minutes 22 last week? Oh, was that the Stefan Bodzin thing? Oh, okay, yeah, I think I talked about some signs. Yeah, so that's off the top of my head. Yeah. FYI, Ableton Link works with Bitwig too. Okay, that's good. I'm planning to try out a Tractor plus Bitwig setup for DJing when I get a chance, hopefully without having to run Ableton live at the same time. Yeah, if you're on a laptop running Bitwig, Ableton and Tractor, I would suggest testing that in a really hot room on a summer's day for 4 hours solid, and just see how it runs, because I can remember when I was doing laptop sets, there were quite a few gigs where the room quickly becomes 30-35 degrees centigrade, and it gets very hot, and your laptop may not like that. Especially if it's having to run the CPU on and RAM, I suppose, on 3 different apps. If it works, it should give me pretty well everything I need for DJing. Yes. Cheers, Dom. Denon, high five. Deadmouse5, the Mexican Deadmouse. Hey Dom, really great video, and I must say, very eye-opening video as well. You helped me to understand the value of just learning and experimenting with my DAW, to absorb and learn new techniques and expand my workflow. No questions this time, just a big thank you for helping out. You're welcome, Denon. High five. I can't even remember last week, but I think I was sort of explaining about wearing 2 different hats, and sort of you need to spend some of your time needs to be just being the student, just learning, just experimenting, just playing with things, and just seeing where it goes. Don't think about releasing music. Don't think about who's going to like this music, who's it going to sound like, what label would want it. Don't think about any of that. Just play around and just have some fun, and then maybe the next week or the next day or the next month or whatever it is, that's when you can sit down and go, right, now I've learned all of that. Now I'm going to focus into making a track using those things that I've learnt. Outsider, Denon, high five. Thanks for going into depth into my question last week. I don't have any this week, but as an extension on what you'd said about certain patches only sounding good with certain notes, similar can be true of compositional techniques. Such as flat sevenths. Some songs it's dissonant magic, in other songs it would sound like what it is, out of key. Yes, you're absolutely right. And again, this ties in with what I've said in the past 2, maybe 3 weeks about music theory, and you need to know the rules to know that you're breaking the rules, and I think that's quite an important thing that we all need to consider sometimes. So yeah, with music theory, knowing that maybe you shouldn't have a flat seventh in something, or perhaps trying a flat seventh and going, this doesn't work, whereas if you place it in the right part of a phrase, and that phrase moves into a particular other chord, you might find that sometimes that dissonance, as you say, sounds magic, and you just like, oh, that tension, that uncomfortable feeling can sort of add to the magic of music. Whereas there are going to be other times where if you had it as your second chord had a flat seventh and in a phrase, then maybe that's that's the wrong kind of tension, because you're just going to go, oh, that sounds like a bum note. It sounds like, you know, you had someone on keys and they slipped. So yeah, you're absolutely right. Have a great weekend, and you too. Zombo, also, have you used Ableton 10? Bitwig is cool, but Ableton is still my main DAW and I love it. I haven't used Ableton 10. I even got the beta of it and never installed it, if I'm honest. Not for any specific reason. There was nothing against Ableton. I'm still a big fan of Ableton, and I think Ableton Live is a great DAW. So anyone that uses it, I wouldn't ever recommend you change it or whatever. But there are some flaws, certainly from version 9 and back. There are some flaws that I kind of felt like, for me, Bitwig offered more. But I don't think that's true for everyone, and I don't think everyone's looking for whatever I'm looking for. So yeah, there we go. So no, I haven't used Ableton 10. I may give it a go at some point, but in all honesty, I just don't find there's anything missing from Bitwig for me. So I kind of just don't have a reason to try Ableton 10. Having said that, I never used the Ableton Push either until I gave a talk at some expo a few years back, and they had a room of Ableton Push guys giving demos, and I did sort of look at that and go, shit, yeah, had I known about that feature for the last 5 years, it would have been great. So yeah, maybe I should look at these things more. Another one from Zombo, Mau5trap needs to make more remix comp. Yeah, that would be quite good, actually. They almost, or did they do that? I think they did do a remix comp at one point. I think, yeah, it was the 10 years of Mau5trap thing. Yeah, because I think I did one for that, for Black Gummy. But yeah, it might be quite nice for them to do a regular one of them. That'd be pretty cool. St. Nicholas, thank you, Denon, high five. Nightquaker, did I really say audible instruments-based modules? I'm such a dum-dum. I meant they're mutable instruments-based, but the equivalents in VCV Rack themselves are called audible instruments. Okay, so yeah, I'm guessing that's a licensing thing. Also, Denon, high five. And Deadly Custard, double Denon, high five. And I am not quite at the 30-minute mark, so that is all the questions for this week. Thank you, everyone who asked your questions. Thanks to everyone who watches this. As usual, if you do watch it and you do like it, please do hit that like, comment, subscribe, whatever, and share, because it helps me, to be honest. YouTube put priority on recommended viewing and stuff on anything that has more likes and comments and subscribes and whatever else. So obviously the more you guys do that, the more exposure it gets me, and then the more questions I get, which means the more answers you all get. So it helps us all, I suppose, in the long run. And I hate asking for people to like, comment, subscribe. You know, a lot of you guys will have noticed I don't, you know, when it comes to social media, on my Facebook fan page, I don't post many memes. I don't post many questions. I'm not looking for huge interaction. As much as I enjoy it, I just don't care that much about how many people like my page, and I know I probably should, but I don't. So there we go. Yeah, and I think that is it. While I've been talking, I can't think of anything else house admin wise. I hope you all have a great weekend. I am off to the Manchester warehouse project tomorrow, so I'm going to catch up with Rinzin and Monster Get Down, and obviously Deadmau5 will be there. And yeah, so I'm looking forward to that. If any of you guys are there, then let me know and I'll see you there. Other than that, have a great weekend. I'll see you this time next week. Cheers.